Continuing on with our overview and tutorials of our state JPRs, once we've accomplished our JPRs number 1 and 2, the two mandatories, you'll note that the state requirement calls for 3 random sheets to be pulled. These will involve some sort of scenario. 3 and 4, usually it will be either 3 or 4, but you'll note that it lists a worksheet as attached. We'll scroll down here in a second and break down that worksheet. But the ones that have a worksheet attached, that is something that will be furnished to you on test day, but something that it's very good to be familiar with before you ever show up. Just like the JPRs, they're always available publicly, something you can be familiar with long before you show up for your test. But this will be an overview of JPR number 3. So notice that between 3 and 4, you have scenario and scenario. One is a fire, one is a spill. Make yourself familiar with the differences between these as it pertains to the skill station. This will focus on the random skill sheet number 3, your scenario with fire. So we'll scroll down, rolling through our state website to Hazmat Ops JPR number 3, analyzing the incident. So our task is kind of a multifaceted one. Given an example of a scenario involving a known hazardous material, interpret the hazard and response information obtained from the current edition of the Emergency Response Guidebook, the ERG, and a Safety Data Sheet, SDS. This one's timed, but will be done as a team. This will be usually a team evolution, at least 2, if not 3 or 4 of you. Plan on 2, and if you get more people, then that's great. As always, avoid safety violations. An automatic failure for safety is the worst thing you could have, because you can show up knowing all your stuff and be ready to stand and deliver, and all of a sudden now you're retesting because of a safety failure. You shouldn't run into that situation, but just something to always have in the back of your head on any JPR. So to kind of recap the task piece, you'll be given a scenario. Your state proctors will develop one. It'll involve a fire or a spill. In the case of JPR 3, it'll be a fire. They'll give you either through a video briefing or through simply a picture. Maybe it'll show a tanker on fire. It might show a facility on fire. It'll show you some sort of scenario, and they'll paint a picture with a story, and then there will be accompanying video or picture that'll show you this fire. They'll also provide for you the current edition of the ERG and an SDS sheet. The goal of this is to have you develop a plan within the ICS system, and also to demonstrate your ability as a team to use that SDS and that ERG to come up with the initial steps of a plan. This isn't to develop a long-term operation. This is for you as operations personnel to demonstrate that you know where to get started if you find yourself as the first in person, first in company on an incident of this nature. So you'll notice this is a note more for the state proctors than it is for the students, but when possible, utilize the SDS from JPR number 2 in the current edition of the ERG. Most state proctors will build their scenario should you pull the SDS sheet, which we know you will because it's a mandatory sheet. They'll likely use the same material that you researched already on that SDS skill station. So you should have that familiarity going into this particular piece of the exercise. So getting into the tasks of this station, you'll notice there are only 6. So always keep it simple in your mind. Go nice and slow. Be familiar with these sheets when you show up so that there's no surprises. All of this is available to you right now, long in advance of your test. So there's really no reason to not be familiar with the steps that are going to be involved. They could show you a picture of any kind of fire, any kind of release, a spill, whatever it is, and you'll still know the steps to apply. So step number 1 in this hazmat scenario involving a fire: initiate the incident management system according to the National Incident Management System, NIMS. This is material that, if it hasn't already been covered in class, that's available in your textbook. It's understanding the NIMS system is something that's used nationally, so it's something you can easily Google, you can research yourself, but everything pertinent to this skill sheet is available in your textbook. So we're going to set up the National Incident Management System. We're going to come up with a basic plan. You may have heard the term CFLOP, Command, Finance, Logistics, Operations, and Planning. You could line those out for your proctor, or you can say that using the ICS or the Incident Management System, we are going to start developing an IAP, an Incident Action Plan. We'll expand on those as we get down into the worksheet portion. But those are some of the key words that those proctors are going to be looking for. Second step, once we've got this ball rolling on a management system, is to recognize, what do we have? Picture this in your mind in simple terms. What do we have? What is the container and what is it doing? Container behavior. Is this a drum that's on fire? Is this a drum that's off-gassing? Is this a tanker? Is this 10 rail cars on their side on fire? What is the container and what is it doing? In this scenario, because we're being given a fire scenario, something's going to be on fire. You know that as soon as you pull this sheet. Next is the material behavior. What is it doing? Is it material that's collecting along the ground? Is it something that's going up and out? Is it something that's burning off? Is it something that's burning but there's also a liquid on the ground? They simply want to know, what is that material doing? Next, we're going to identify product control measures. This doesn't have to be an elaborate plan. You just need to verbalize based on the things you've been taught in operations. Are we planning to dam, dike, and divert? Are we planning to retain any of that material? Are we simply letting it burn? Do we have a plan of going and actually cooling and laying down a foam blanket? Just identify based on the scenario you're given, this is our plan. This is what we're going to do to control that product. Any questions, then go back to your textbook and your content section of D2L and review that product control section. Remember, we went over a lot of things pertaining to product control. Applying any of those methods would be acceptable as long as it's applicable to the scenario they give you. Number 5, describe an alternate plan if initial actions are unsuccessful. Some proctors may be good with you just simply saying, we're going to develop an alternate plan. Better still, give them a plan B. Say plan A is, we're going to try to put water on that, put the fire out. Should that not work, then our plan is to evacuate the area further and implement some product control measures. Whatever makes sense for your scenario, just remember all those things that you've learned throughout the course and apply those appropriately. And finally, like with most JPRs, describe how you're going to secure that scene and preserve evidence. Definitely something you need to verbalize, not something you want to risk failing the station on simply because you didn't verbalize securing the scene and preserving evidence. But you'll also notice that it says describe the process. Again, this does not have to be an elaborate process. Just line out how you plan on doing that. It could be as simple as saying, we're going to get some more engine companies out here to help us cordon off the area. We're going to utilize local police department or sheriff's department resources. You could talk about barrier tape. You could talk about closing roads. Any of those things that sound appropriate based on the scenario you're given. How do you plan on securing the scene? For one, to keep the public safe and keep the responders safe, but also to preserve any evidence on scene, because there will be an investigation later on in the process. So to recap, if I'm verbalizing this station as a team, somebody mentioned that I'm initiating the incident management system according to NIMS standards. We're going to develop an IAP, an incident action plan. Initially, I want to find out what is my container and what is it doing. Along with that, what is the material if I can figure it out, and what is it doing? You may not have the specifics of the material, but if you can classify it using that ERG and using that SDS as a reference, you could know that I have a flammable gas or I have a flammable liquid. Based on the container behavior and material behavior, what product control measures are you going to implement? And then describe your alternate plan if that initial plan fails. So simply line out a plan A and a plan B, and that's sufficient. And then in the end, always mention that you're setting up a process of securing that scene and preserving evidence, and tell them how you're going to achieve that. That's your overview of Hazmat JPR number 3.